A Plague Tale is one of those games that comes out of complete nowhere and absolutely sets fire in the souls of everyone who plays it. There's no hype parade or completely fabricated E3 2017 presentation, not to point any fingers or anything. Asobo Studio is a French studio that I'd never heard of before. Apparently, they've been around since 2003, but they've mostly spent their time on licensed Disney games and fucking Zoo Tycoon. And then they come out of nowhere with this absolute banger and show off an incredible amount of talent. First thing that struck me was that these guys are most certainly fans of Naughty Dog, and specifically The Last of Us. The linear maps with the side paths full of crafting materials and collectibles, the focus on stealth-based combat, the persistent companion who follows you around everywhere, the way the character mumbles to themselves.
Those bastards. What are they doing?
Looks like someone jerry-rigged this thing.
This game is very much emulating the style of The Last of Us, but it's not cheaply done or just a carbon copy. There is a lot that sets this game apart. One of the major things is that A Plague Tale is not a post-apocalyptic game. The characters are experiencing this plague as it progresses. The Last of Us was a story about eking out a living, survival by brutality, and violently holding close to those dear to you in the years after a plague has wiped out humanity. In The Last of Us, you're not confronting this great evil head on. It's more like a meandering, chaotic, neutral thing that sort of gets in your way when you're trying to do other shite. A Plague Tale is much more about facing the evils of this plague head on and uncovering a grand mystery behind it.
I am the Grand Inquisitor Vitalis.
What's up, villains? I'm fed up and exhausted with all this fake bullshit, so I made a definition of a fake prankster.
It becomes very obvious early on that A Plague Tale is a story about children, not adults.
The siege of Chateau d'Ombrage. 2 girls versus thousands of rats. This battle will go down in history.
Joel in The Last of Us is a self-serving, rough-around-the-edges, single father who would do anything to protect his way of life.
Let's see what they need.
What do you think you're doing? Keep driving.
I got a kid, Joel.
So do we.
But we have room.
Keep driving, Tommy.
After losing his daughter to a seemingly apathetic system and world, he quickly teaches himself to cut all dead weight and trust only what he can reach out and choke to death.
Repay you.
For all those goddamn years I took care of us.
Took care. That's what you call it? I got nothing but nightmares from those years.
You survived because of me.
It wasn't worth it.
Even with Tess, it's heavily hinted that they don't do pillow talk. They'll fuck and fight to the death for each other, but you get the sense that she and Joel don't communicate their emotions all too openly. And when he loses her, it's clear that rather than confront that loss and grief, he immediately burns those emotional scars to stop the bleeding. And in the end, it's like Joel's not even all that different. He opens up his care for Ellie, sure, but he still continues to solve every problem with bullets and self-serving lies. A Plague Tale isn't about an adult coming to terms with loss. It's a bit of a coming-of-age story for these orphans enveloped by this seemingly insurmountable darkness. And throughout the game, you really do get that sense of growth. You start off scared and confused, barely making your way past this ever-growing darkness.
Oh no! The rats! Keep away from them!
And by the end of the game, you're walking head-on, literally, into that very same darkness. Combat reflects this too. You're a 16-year-old girl at best with a sling and rocks facing down heavily armed soldiers. And by the end, the soldiers are almost literally running scared from you. The story here is about clinging to what's dear, but not in the nihilistic way that Joel's taught himself to. It's instead about learning to build relationships and holding on to innocence even when you're a victim of and party to a violent world. And this is an important distinction. A Plague Tale is not a science fiction realistic type game. It's very much a fantasy game, and that sets it apart very heavily from The Last of Us in terms of the mechanics and how the story progresses. There are a lot of emotional moments in The Last of Us which get interrupted by random dudes who presumably want to steal your shit or just eat you.
You're gonna chop me up into tiny pieces.
I think this is intentional to make the world feel constantly threatening, like there's no place for emotions when survival is at stake, even if it does get annoying a little bit. A Plague Tale, however, gives you a couple of full chapters and other scenes here and there of just peaceful, intimate moments to take in the setting and get the sense that really all is not lost in this world.
It could be a fish, a frog, I really don't know. We don't have time for this right now. Come on.
But I've never seen a real frog.
And the enemies are much more personally threatening presence to Amicia and her brother. The environments are stunning to look at. The cinematography really shines here. Combine the Uncharted sense of uncovering lost kingdoms and The Last of Us's bleak apocalyptic setting, and you have a Plague Tale's beautifully crafted world that makes you stop now and then just to take it all in. The set pieces are incredible too. The game is very carefully constructed so that shit. Lucas, what are you doing? Come on, we gotta go, man. Fuck. The game is very carefully constructed so that each set piece is building up to the grand finale, which is the final boss of the game. There are actually only 3 bosses in the game, 1 at the beginning and 2 toward the end. But that plays into the game's strength, which is its incredibly compelling set-piece construction, rather than just throwing a buffed-up dude at you every couple of hours to make sure you're still paying attention. There are many moments like crossing a plague-stricken battlefield which are slow and intimate and help imprint the image of this horrifying world into your mind.
Oh my goodness.
Amicia, do we have to walk on them?
I know, Hugo, but we don't have a choice.
And there are quite a few holy shit moments where your jaw is left hanging by what's on the screen. And I have to say, during the second to last boss, I lost my mind when he pulled one of the coolest fucking things I've seen a bad guy do in a long time. There are so many to choose from, but the other most notable set piece is finding your way to an ancient castle during a storm. These brilliant fuckers at Asobo Studios synced up the lightning strikes to the harsh, whining strikes of the viola, and it's one of the best designed pieces of sound in any game or film I've experienced ever.
I don't see how.
Whoa! Did you see that?
The lightning bolt. They're afraid of lightning.
The soundtrack is fucking amazing in this game. Mostly deep strings like cello and double bass with strong, heavy percussion that changes key and intensity depending on the situation. It's got so much emotional impact to it, and it really drives these set pieces home in a way I feel might go overlooked by some other reviewers. Anyway, I've been avoiding it for a bit, but I have to talk about the rats. These fucking rats. Like, I'm not even scared of rats in real life, but this game has a way of turning these tiny skittering creatures into the most pressing, disturbing presence you have ever been near. They remind me a lot of the Demon Tower from Kingdom Hearts 3, a lot of little black creatures swarming together to form a destructive, sentient mass. They're legitimately creepy and behave in ways that keep you morbidly fascinated from start to finish. And it's not just a gimmick either. These rats are perfectly utilized throughout the game, and there's a fair amount of crossover between battling the Inquisition soldiers and staving off the existential threat that is this plague of rats. This game does some really cool stuff with these mechanics in a way that keeps you hooked and strategizing each encounter until the credits roll. Asobo Studio, thank you for creating such an amazing experience. A Plague Tale, in a sense, is a linear story and character-driven experience that everyone should be talking about in a world where Fortnite and other live service multiplayer games have made single player a bit of a dirty word. It's an uncompromising, creatively constructed, meticulously crafted world which should now cement Asobo Studios' name as a studio to watch out for. I, for one, will certainly be looking forward to the next original game they put out.